In Rainbows, the English rock band Radiohead's 7th studio release, is an album that has moved me beyond words since I first fully discovered it about a decade ago. This album was released on the 10th of October in 2007 in a pay-what-you-want scheme. It was the first of its kind for any major act like Radiohead to do, and it did make headlines worldwide. This album also received a lot of critical acclaim, with a lot of people thinking that this was one of the best albums of the year, of the decade, or even of all time. The songwriting, arrangement, engineering, mixing, production all over this album are absolutely beautiful, and shout out to Nigel Godrich who did the production on this album. It is personally my favorite album of all time. It has had the biggest impact upon me out of any album I've ever listened to, and has really shaped my relationship with music in the last 10 years. But why does this album have such an effect upon people that makes it not only a huge favorite in Radiohead's discography, but a musical favorite in general? Well, having felt like their previous studio album, Hail to the Thief, was drawn out a little bit too long at 56 minutes, they decided with this album to go with 10 tracks. And these 10 tracks, in frontman Tom Yorke's own words, were meant to represent what moves us. The tracklist starts off with the song 15 Steps, which was born out of a mad rhythm experiment by the band, and begins with this clapping groove in the 5/4 time signature, which is a rarely used time signature and not usually found in a lot of rock and pop songs, so you already sort of know just from the sound of the first track that you're in for something a little bit different. And then the guitar kicks in, and it just sends shivers down my spine every single time. The next track is Bodysnatchers. Bodysnatchers comes in loud and obnoxious. It's probably the most intense sounding track on the album. Bodysnatchers was recorded in one take in this mansion called Tottenham House in Wiltshire, England, which dates back to the 1720s. The producer, Godrich, decided to put the band in this mansion for 3 weeks to record while living in caravans parked outside. The idea was to purposely put them in an uncomfortable situation to try and get a bit more out of them. And I think it worked, because Tom Yorke himself describes this track as being recorded during a period of hyperactive mania, inspired by the 1972 novel The Stepford Wives' Victorian ghost stories, as well as Tom Yorke's feeling of your physical consciousness trapped without being able to fully connect with anything else. And I feel like, weirdly enough, you can pick that all up from listening to the track. At the start and at the back of the track, you have these really loud, fuzzy guitars that make you want to shout and dance, but then in the middle, it's contrasted with this really soft guitar, which just brings on all the emotion. Bodysnatchers is personally one of my favorite songs off the album and sends multiple shivers down my spine, especially in the middle where the breakdown happens. Next is track number 3. It is Nude. Nude is one of the fan favorites of Radiohead in general. A lot of fans love this song. It's very beautiful, a lot slower than Bodysnatchers, and this song includes a lot of strings, a little bit of morphed, chopped up vocals, as well as a bass line that really ties the sound together, and it's very rhythmic. This song has a very long history dating back to the late 1990s. I think this song was recorded in the sessions for OK Computer and then was scrapped and discarded. There were apparently completely different lyrics in the original song in the OK Computer version. It was also then recorded for the sessions of Kid A, I think, and Hail to the Thief even. And we finally see this song pop up in a studio release on In Rainbows after Colin Greenwood wrote a new bass line for the track, and the lyrics were completely reworked from the original. Thank God, because I really like the lyrics on this song. It's also important to note here that the chord progression in this song uses a double tonic complex, which means that it changes from one key to another. The chord progression pretty much changes from one tone at the start to a complete different tone at the end, taking the listener on this sonic journey with the chord progression. And this is where you really start to see this idea of change and progression in Rainbows. This change in the chord progression parallels the change that is present within the musicians themselves over the span of the last decade, which Godrich touches upon. He speaks about how Nude missed its window in 1997, and it took a lot of reinvention to bring it back to the place where Radiohead could capture it again in a way that resonated for the people playing it, the artists themselves. It was essentially the same song, nothing had really changed. What had changed are the people playing it. Next we have track 4, Weird Fishes. Weird Fishes is once again a fan favourite. This track is packed with finger-picking guitar, and it leads into this drop with the drums in the middle that's absolutely to die for. It's so good. This is one of the most beautiful songs I've ever heard. It has a beautiful build-up the entire time leading up to that drop, and also has a really great drum beat. This idea of there being a lead-up to a change or a break, a drop in the mid sort of point of the song is quite common on this album, and it creates this feeling of transience, which I think Tom York has talked about. You sort of start at one place at the start of the track and you end somewhere completely different from where you thought you would. And it feels a lot of the time like not only is the music going somewhere, but it's taking you with it. My favorite 2 lines on the track are the first and the last. So the first line starts off with, "In the deepest ocean, bottom of the sea, your eyes, they turn me." And then the last line not only echoes back to that first line, but shows the change that's happened in Tom York and also in the listener themselves. So from the lyrics themselves, you can see that there's this transformational journey taken. Sonically as well, it really links up. Track number 5 is All I Need, which is one of Radiohead's most direct love songs you'll ever hear, and it starts off with the beautiful strings, and then Phil's drums come in, and then Colin's bass, and then once that happens, I'm sold. Glockenspiel and synthesizers, piano at the end. There's so many different instruments that are used here, and they are all used so well together in such a perfect way. Some of my favorite lyrics are on this song, ever. One of my favorite lines is, "I am all the days that you choose to ignore," which really summarizes how it feels to feel unwanted, unloved, and lonely. But then you also have the chorus, which feels slightly a bit more happier than the verses, and it's really interesting because the lyrics give you a bit of hope, but then he finishes the chorus with, "I'm in the middle of your picture," line here reads. I feel like this is perfect writing with the lyrics because it really captures that feeling of false hope for a second, which comes with obsession and unrequited love. The song then leads in to the infamous beautiful ending with these amazing piano chords that just build up and start creating this loud sound, along with some crashing cymbals and a bunch of strings playing all the different keys on a scale being all played together in the background. It creates this wall of noise sonically, and it really starts to isolate me, and I really start to feel how Tom York feels through the lyrics just from listening to the song. This last outro of this song is emotionally overwhelming. It makes you feel isolated, like you're just alone with this feeling that this song has left you with, and it's definitely my favorite song of all time because of that. Next we have Faust Arp. It's the 6th track on the album. It's a shortcut. It includes some more strings and some finger-picking guitar, which are 2 of the most prominent instruments across the album. And I see this track as a midway point of the album. It's like you've made it halfway through, let's just relax and breathe for a second. Then the 7th track, Reckoner. While Radiohead had a song called Reckoner since 2001, it was actually a completely different song, which they then changed the name of and used in some Tom York solo project. But they then still kept the title of Reckoner and created a completely new song during the sessions of In Rainbows. I think the drums are easily the best thing about this track, and that shows how good the drums are, because the rest of the track is amazing as well. There is just so much happening with the drums, with all this clanging percussion, and also these shakers are included. The guitars also get themselves involved, and those guitars combined with the drums just creates this groovy sort of sound to the track that just gets my head bopping every single time. There is then a breakdown in the midpoint of the song. The drums are silenced, and then Tom York comes in, sings along to this melody, backed up with some guitar strings, as well as some oohing and ahhing, also done by Tom. I cannot stress enough how impactful the sound is that's created from these three things. These three instruments are combined all so perfectly together, this one unified sound. This is my dad's favorite song of all time as well, so it really has a special place in my heart. Next is House of Cards, which is the 8th track on the album. This song was first performed by Tom acoustically at the 2005 Trade Justice Rally in London. This song was in the works for a while and had an early version with a bass riff in the style of REM, according to bassist Colin Greenwood. The song's rhythm was then reworked by Tom and Philip Selway, creating a song that sounds very human, describing the universal experience of struggling through love, sexual relationships, and marriage. There is quite a haunting reverb sound to Tom's voice in this track that link back to the recording place of Tottenham House, where apparently Godrich would record sounds of the ambience in that house and then keep it in his back pocket to then mix in later with the songs. And it creates this really unique feel to Thom Yorke's voice in this track for sure. The 9th track on the album is Jigsaw Falling into Place. Such an underrated track. It was a song that was first performed on the 2006 tour with the working title Open Pick. This song was driven by the bass, a beautiful blend of pop and rock. It's so well crafted, with a rising and complex intensity present, building anticipation and creating beautiful movement in the melody. This song's theme revolves around a few different observations made by Thom Yorke while he was out and about in Oxford. It's about him observing the people around him that are drinking themselves into oblivion or drinking away their problems so they can forget everything, and about how substances can create this feeling of elation in us but also this darkness and sadness as well concurrently. And Radiohead's really good at this. Radiohead's really good at creating something that feels both happy and sad at the same time, or maybe sad but beautiful. And then the last track on the album is called Videotape, track number 10. Videotape is very, very interesting. So Videotape is a piano ballad, but it wasn't always one. Radiohead spent lots of time composing this track, going through every possible parameter, which was absolute agony according to Tom. They were essentially looking for something that emotionally moved them and had a real emotional impact upon them, the musicians. And I really appreciate this about the way that Radiohead goes about their music. They make music for themselves first and foremost, and then secondly for the audience. Apparently during this time when they were doing this with the song Videotape, Thom Yorke was kicked out of the studio for being a negative influence, his words. And then he just went out with Dunwood, the guy that created the album work, and then they came back later in the night around like 11 o'clock I think, and they came back to the studio to find Godrich and Johnny Greenwood having completely redone Videotape. Apparently they had stripped back all this nonsense that Thom Yorke had tried to throw onto the track and just left it as this simple bare bones piano track. And this brought Tom and Dunwood to tears when they heard the song. Similar to the album cover, it's this concept of stripping things back to their most pure and basic forms. Sometimes the most basic forms of something can have the most impact upon someone. Something else to note about this song is the syncopated piano. Essentially, the piano chords in this song, which are the driving force of the track, are not played actually on the beat of the music, but instead they're played between each beat. They're played on the and. There are some great videos further diving into this, including a 38-minute discussion by Warren Music and another 10-minute, more succinct version by Vox. This syncopation is much more obvious in earlier live takes of the song, such as the infamous 2006 Bonnaroo version. However, Yorke really appreciates the hidden quality of the piano syncopation in the studio version, saying in 2008 that Videotape was his favorite thing that they had ever created because there is this inexpressible substance behind the song. In a sense, the syncopation is still there, even if harder to find, and he likes that about the track. And the stripped back somber piano aids in telling the story of the lyrics, a dying man saying goodbye to loved ones through an old videotape. In Rainbows faces transformation head-on through sonically and emotionally moving the listener and musician, embodying change and progress, and even lyrically confronting death in its final track. In Rainbows is all about change, evolution, transience, and essentially death. Everything leads to death. Life would be nothing without death. And so to end the album with a song literally about death makes so much sense to me. And then the album finishes off with one of the most beautiful lines I've heard in my entire life, capturing the beauty of death. No matter what happens now, you shouldn't be afraid, because I know today has been the most perfect day I've ever seen. I hope you enjoyed the video. Radiohead In Rainbows is one of my favourite albums of all time, and I really wanted to do a love letter to my favourite album of all time. Hope you have enjoyed this video, and if you haven't listened to this album and you got in the whole way through this video, I really hope I have convinced you to go listen to it. It's amazing. Or if you haven't listened to it in a while, go give it a re-listen. Please comment, like and subscribe. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you soon. Bye!